Alright guys, welcome back to PacWest Bigfoot. This is David. If you guys want to get in there and if you're new here and want to jump on the old list here for the free giveaways every single month and join the clan, you can go over to PacWestBigfoot.com, PacWestBigfoot.com, and join the clan there. Just so you know, I did not get a name with that email, but I did give you an email to the winner this month. This month's giveaway was a book by William Jevning and autographed called The Minnesota Iceman. And remember, if I don't get your addresses back within 72 hours, I do choose another winner. Okay, so that's how that works. Just so you know, also, I have a new author here. She has an awesome little children's book here, Bigfoot, and it's called Lock Your Doors, Country Folk, and it's by Linda Newton Perry, and it's with Christopher Perry. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to them, and that is going to be the free giveaway for May. The free giveaway for May is Lock Your Doors, Country Folk by Linda Newton Perry. And you guys can also grab her book out there online. I will be getting back to some of the live streams on YouTube here shortly, either today or next Friday. Kind of depends on this morning how everything's going. Other than that, let's do this. Let's just get into this week's encounter story. This one comes to me secondhand from Northern California. Let me take a sip of water. Also, one other thing. Some of you have been asking me why I advertise the Sasquatch coffee. I'll tell you this right now. I don't receive any sort of fees for that or anything. It's not like an advertisement. I put it out there because I like it. I really enjoy the coffee. So there you go. So there's some Sasquatch coffee in your eye. Following Bigfoot tracks near Fort Goff and finding Bigfoot and a wife. My name is Jacob, and during a camping trip, with my girlfriend at the time, currently my wife, we followed a set of Bigfoot tracks near Fort Goff, and we followed them right to a Bigfoot. This encounter, or better yet, visual of this thing was quick, frightening, and what led up to it was even freakier, but awesome all at the same time. Here's our account. Camping with Bigfoot. My wife and I met because of our love for everything outdoors. I was out on a camping weekend, and so was she. Of course, she was with some friends, and I was the loner. Either way, and suffice it to say, we met while fishing. She was up early, and so was I. It was love at first sight. At least it was for me. Sorry to get so mushy about it, but it was, and it is, where this whole encounter and visual began. And yes, a year and a half later after the incident, we were married, just so you know. However, it was not just the fishing that brought us together, the outdoors. It was Bigfoot that truly hooked us up, and literally through our lives together. It started with the fishing, and it ended in a long hike and a scary face-to-face encounter. Fishing for you. As I said, we met while fishing one early morning. She woke up and headed out down to the river. There she found a little rock outcrop and climbed up it and started fishing. She did not know at first, but I was not even 15 to 20 yards away doing the same thing. However, I was standing near a thick of low shrubs and trees that met the river's edge. It made me feel kind of like a peeping Tom, to tell you the truth. I'm not a perv, but I caught myself staring at her for a moment anyways. That was until she finally noticed me, and I looked back out towards the river abruptly. She knew I was camping there as well and started the conversation that morning with a simple hello. The conversation started, and eventually, after a few minutes, we figured the raised voices would be softened if I just climbed up there with her. We exchanged names and talked for about a half hour about the campgrounds and the Klamath River. We both grew up around it. However, I grew up on one side of it and she on the other side. Eventually, as the sun finally peaked over the mountains and onto the river, we decided to hike down a couple 100 yards to a shady spot where a small bend in the river made for great fishing. I have to say, looking back, even at the scarier part of the day, it was still the best day of my life. Fishing for Bigfoot. We talked, and when you are fishing, time can go real fast when you are alone, but when you are with good company, well, seems to slow down. She actually caught a couple trout, and eventually one that was of keeping size. she decided to take it and put it on a string about 10 to 15 feet away from where we were. That is when the adventure began. She looked at me, then back at the ground, and then back at me, waving me over. Footprints, human-like footprints. 2 of them could be seen plain as day in the soft, sandy, clay-like mud of the river bank. At first I thought it was simply left there from people possibly swimming the day before, but upon further inspection, they were rather large for people. And, unless one of the Sacramento Kings forwards were out there that day, or the day before, earlier that morning, well, this had to be a pretty big person. I have to say we were rather curious, and maybe we just wanted to spend more time together, but we decided to see who had made these tracks and decided to take a little hike and follow them. We decided it would be good first to let her friends know, and with their smirks, but the okay, we were on our way for a hike. I'm also a gun owner, and I knew at that moment I pulled it out that my my wife-to-be was not a fan. But she knew that even though this felt like a date in a way, we were in the woods, and those were rather large tracks. Shoot, the conversation of Bigfoot did come up when we took off, and actually became most of the conversation. Well, between getting to know more about each other, that is. It was not long, though, before we found a couple more impressions in the soft dirt next to the game trail we seemed to find ourselves on, not 50 yards north of the old highway we had to cross first. Now I know when people see these things crossing roads, it is usually near a body of water, if you noticed. They seemed to be the same size, however, we could not make out any toes this time, but you could tell they were most likely from the same person. Or Bigfoot, we thought, and laughed. We were not scared, frightened, or even nervous that Bigfoot could be or would be what we were following. Simply put, we were a little lost in small talk about our lives and nature itself. No real thought to the danger we could be in was even a thought for us at the time. Oblivious is what we were, and being oblivious in the woods can be dangerous, just so you know. Did you fart? The sun was up. I think it was around noon when we found ourselves about 4 miles north of the campground. Actually, a little northeast. You can look on a map, but this terrain was hills and mountains beyond. But where we were was simply hills that were easy enough to climb and walk along. It was when we entered a little opening in the trees that I first noticed a sort of foul smell. It was not strong, but enough to wonder if my wife might be thinking I ripped one. You know, silent but deadly. I smelled the air and asked if she could smell the somewhat bad, eggy, musty, pungent nastiness. She could. But whatever that smell was coming from was dead or dying, I thought. We kept walking and noticed again along the game trail some impressions on the ground. And this time we could make out toes again. We got a little excited, but with that smell lingering in the air, the excitement came with a little trepidation, without the fear involved. However, whoever or whatever it was this time headed off the trail and up the mountain or hillside. Thicker woods lay ahead in a bush that was pretty thick enough to worry about rattlesnakes. We looked at each other and simply kept going. Our voices got a little louder as we hiked upwards and losing a little ground between each other because of the terrain. But the conversation of Bigfoot continued, and of course, some banter about hikes through the woods we've made over the years. It was about halfway up when that awful smell hit us again. This time, however, it was stronger and much more gag-worthy. As a matter of fact, I remember looking back as my wife held her nose, making a gagging sound at the same time. We stopped for a moment and decided to sit on a nearby log as we took in some water and a Cliff Bar. About 2 minutes into that, we heard what sounded like wood knocking. Just 2 to 3 knocks, if I remember correctly, and it only happened twice. Once while sitting down snacking for a few, and once more as we stood up and started walking on. The knocks, you knew, were wood on wood, and they came from 2 different directions. That is what set us to worrying a bit. to the north, and back behind us to the south is where they came from. And we did not hear a thing close in behind us. That was the freaky part. Everything was silent. No birds, no rodents, no nothing. We stopped immediately, and I actually unsnapped the strap over my holstered gun and put my hand behind me to motion my wife to stop as well. That is when we finally heard some movement, but not walking. Not yet, at least. I turned and looked, and could see that the sound was coming from a tree not too far away, shaking back and forth wildly. We could only see the top section of it, but it was really moving back and forth. No, there was no strong wind that day that could have been doing that. Something was shaking it, period. After a few seconds or so, the real fun, I say it condescendingly, began. Something we seemed to be joking about for the last hour or so became all too real. Now I know what people feel when fear and that overwhelming sense of danger strike the moment you see one of these creatures. It was still to be about 2 to 3 minutes, I recall, before we saw this thing. But leading up to it, another tree, not far from the first one, maybe 15 yards or so away, was now shaking back and forth violently as well. It looked as if it might snap. My wife took a couple steps towards me and said that we should maybe, and slowly, start heading back down the hillside. I agreed. That is when she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye, just up past me over my shoulder, about 20 to 25 yards further up the hill. I thought at first it was a tree, or a large dead stump protruding about 8 or so feet up off the forest floor. That was, of course, until it moved. While the tree knocks and the tree shaking happened over a period of a few minutes or so, this whole incident was rather brief. Like I said, once you see one of these things, it gets seared into your mind, and it feels like it lasts for a whole lot longer than it does. That large, old stump moved. It literally turned and faced us. It was a Bigfoot. A large, hairy, ugly, nasty-smelling Bigfoot. But before I describe what we saw for the briefest of moments, I want to finish what happened first. It turned and faced us. We stood still at that moment. I slowly put my hand over my holster, and as I did, I got a sense, as this thing moved its head and shoulders, that it was following my movement. It stood there as still as a tree, just staring at us with its dark but large inset eyes. When they say people who have seen this thing, that it is hairy, it really is hairy, full of it, except for around the nose and eyes. The mouth was also small, at least it seemed like a dark, lengthy slit to be sure. But we did not see this thing open its mouth, so who knows? It was hair, you could see, not fur, nor was it really bushy. It was just hair, like on my head, just longer, thicker too. It stood at least 9 feet tall. It had to be. Even though we were downhill of this thing at the moment, we were not that far away from it, and it was massive. The shoulder width was huge, like 1.5 of me for sure. And when it moved its head to follow my movement, it seemed to use its whole upper torso and shoulders to move its head. There was no real neck. I guess maybe a bit of a one, but not much of one, if at all. The face was something you're just never really prepared to see. I guess, like some say, you have no reference for it. None. It was smashed, almost. The nose, the eyes, while large and dark, were somewhat sunk into the head a bit and far apart. The hair was dark, almost jet black, it seemed to us. I guess between the size of this thing and the fact that it was dark and gruesome looking, well, we started, finally, after what seemed like forever, but was more like 30 or so seconds, gathered ourselves together. We started to back up, and that's when this knocking started again, and from behind us. Another Bigfoot in back of us was nothing we wanted to run into again, nor did we want to find ourselves in some kind of a trap. So we moved the opposite way, My wife led the way as I kept my eyes on that monster of a thing for as long as I could. It just stood there, watching us. No sound, no movement, other than its body turning to watch us walk off. I never saw it move an inch from its spot either. We moved through the trees quickly and even picked up the pace after I lost visual on that thing. I pulled my gun out of its holster and took the lead, holding her hand and moving at an angle down the hill, down the mountain until we made it to the road. She'll be coming down the mountain when she comes. While that was the dumbest thing my wife and I ever did together after that moment, it was the moment that brought us together. What a date, huh? When we got down to the road, we were pretty freaked out, but at the same time I caught her smiling. Nervous as all get out, but smiling after a few moments. I caught myself smiling for a moment, too, and it was all because we were alive and safe. We've been married for over a decade to the day today, and I have to say, a love for nature is something we still share, even with our children. Yes, we are a lot more cautious while out here today, but that trip to Fort Goff has not been our last. There was a night just before we got married when we went camping back near the same location, and I swear I heard wood knocks from up the mountain on the opposite side of the road, near where our encounter happened years earlier. Anyways, that is our encounter and how I met my wife. What a funny but freaky way to meet someone. Thanks, Cameron and Mary.